Hello, and welcome. The first wave of DLC courses just came out for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and well, I have some opinions. But a mix of good and bad, actually. 1 month ago, we were promised 48 new DLC tracks, and just a few days ago, the first set made its way onto the console. Now that people have finally been given a chance to play these tracks, it's been universally accepted that the level of polish isn't quite the same as the vanilla tracks, but I don't think that's entirely a bad thing. To me, this almost feels like the new Super Luigi U of Mario Kart, where levels are a bit shorter, sweeter, and really novelty comes in the form of the fact that we're getting a refreshing amount of new content. That being said, that isn't to say that this new DLC has no issues. There's just a few issues present here alongside a combination of missed potential that I think some of the disappointment may come from. Don't get me wrong though, here my goal is to talk about the pros and cons of what we have so far, and really what that means for the future. Before that though, it's interesting to note how this new DLC is presented in the latest software update, version 2.0. It even comes with a little star on the title screen if you have the courses. The new tracks are displayed right alongside the base tracks, even if you don't own the DLC, which can be a bit off-putting maybe? As obviously the game is essentially showing a giant advertisement to the vast majority of players who don't own the DLC on arguably the main screen of the game, which even applies to online mode. Low-res Luigi's there to tell you, you're broke. But to the surprise of many, actually, the game allows you to play the new DLC courses with friends online or in person, even if they don't own it, and this even applies to public lobbies. It's actually kind of funny, because to your group of friends, all you're doing by owning the DLC is increasing your gambling odds of playing the new courses. That's most of it surrounding the game though, so let's talk about what's actually in these courses. The first main complaint people have really had is of course with the graphical fidelity. We knew from the onset of the reveal trailer that the translation from the art style of Mario Kart Tour to Mario Kart 8 was a bit rough. From comparisons, they did a pretty decent job with the lighting, but the issue remains that the textures themselves leave a lot to be desired. First of all is the quality. On tracks like Paris Promenade, plain uniform textures make up a large part of the environment. Mostly though, the textures, like on Shroom Ridge, have too much of a clay-like appearance, which doesn't really combine well with the bloomy lighting of Mario Kart. It's a contrast of cartoony and realistic. On top of that, some textures can look a bit low-res at a fairly close distance to the player, but then they reach a higher quality once you go on top of those sections. It's a bit noticeable at a far distance, and I noticed this primarily in Paris Promenade and Sky Garden, but it's there throughout the DLC in general. It's kind of subtle, but I feel like people with a keen eye are going to be the ones picking up on it. Once you see it, you really can't unsee it, and I'm sorry for that. Those are the primary issues with graphics though, and I could be more nitpicky like on this fog texture in Sky Garden not looking quite right, but I don't think the graphics are the main focus of this DLC pack. More importantly are the level designs, and this is where I say it ranges in quality quite a bit. The standouts, by far, have been the tour tracks, which, by the way, this is coming from the perspective of someone who hasn't really played much of the original Mario Kart Tour. I don't think the mobile game is necessarily for me, but with these courses finally making their way to Mario Kart 8, the quality of them cannot be understated. Some of them are a lot more dynamic than even the base games in Mario Kart 8, transforming as you go across each lap. Tokyo Blur, while fairly short, does just this, adjusting the path you go through every single lap, which does a lot more to give it character, even if the course itself might be fairly plain. You're kind of just driving on an open road for most of it. Paris Promenade has the track flip on its head for the final lap, which is really cool considering that you don't expect it, and on the final lap you're like, what am I doing? Where am I going? And you're actually just going through the Eiffel Tower back from where you came from. There's also this section here that reminds me of Luigi's Circuit from Mario Kart Double Dash, where you're going head-on against players in last while you're in first, which leads to some pretty funny moments like this. And by far, the winner of this DLC pack is Ninja Hideaway. Nearly every single part of this track has multiple layers to give you an alternate pathway, but unlike Yoshi Valley where everything splits and there's a single optimal path, here everything runs in parallel where you're going on upper levels, lower levels, where the upper levels may be faster, but they're also a lot harder to drive on. It kind of reminds me of a classic Sonic game in that way. Go on the upper path, harder challenge, but on the bottom, take it easy, but you're also kind of close to the pit. This track feels like it was designed for the base game, which is quite high praise considering its origins. It feels like the developers of Mario Kart Tour really put a lot of effort into this track. Although, it's quite funny to note, the other courses have proper labels from what game they originally came from, but for some reason, Ninja Hideaway is missing its label. It's almost as if they're trying to convince us that this is an original track, which they could if I didn't know any better. And my god, the music slaps. Looking at what else is in the DLC though, the returning tracks from classic Mario Kart games are where things can really range in quality. The biggest issue I've noticed is with the scaling of the tracks. some tracks can be a bit too small. And no, I'm not talking about this in my usual complaining way where some corners are just too tight in 200cc. I'm talking physically small, and I think the developers were aware of this. Of course, scaling across the tracks wasn't even perfectly uniform in the base Mario Kart 8 game, like my god, look at the size of these toads. I'm talking though about the environment itself just not being scaled properly, where the carts themselves sometimes don't even fit in the track very well. It's a bit subtle, but take for example Choco Mountain. The road for most of the track narrows down so much to the point where not many carts can even really fit together side by side. I haven't done this yet, but in an online lobby of many players who know what they're doing, oh my god, this is going to be hilariously chaotic. The road is so narrow, I had this moment where I was in first, and I placed a bomb behind me. There are literally no options for the players behind me but to run into it, which may be fun for me, but I imagine it's not very fun for them. More significantly though, I have the biggest issues with Coconut Mall, but in a few ways I didn't even expect. From what I can tell, the developers also thought the course scaling was a bit off, so instead of adjusting the scaling of the course, it seems as if they upped the gravity in the course. As in, when coming off of ramps, I noticed my cart slamming down to the ground a lot quicker in comparison to other tracks, which felt quite off. And even with that adjustment, it's all too easy to slam into walls coming off of ramps because even without tricking, you're still in the air when a turn is going to happen. Now, I didn't notice this increased gravity in 150cc. From what I can tell, it's something they specifically added to 200 to balance the course a bit more, rather than changing the scale, of course. I'm going to do my best to illustrate this point on screen, but I also need to clarify. This is just what I'm feeling. I could be completely off and there's literally no difference in the actual code of the game, or this could just be a thing in other tracks and I'm not aware of it. I'm mentioning this in the video to get some perspective from other people too. Did you feel this while you were playing the game? Am I going crazy? Combine that with some other weird quirks of the tracks. For one, the escalator ramps are a lot more obvious on whether they're going up or down. In the original Mario Kart Wii, they were just stairs, so you had to pay attention to which direction they were going. It's also kind of useless if you're playing 200cc. You're going so fast it literally does not matter if you go off the wrong ramp. Also, the Miis died. Again. They used to be driving these cars back and forth as obstacles, but instead they got replaced by shy guys who don't know how to drive and are committing numerous parking violations. Looking at the other returning tracks, Sky Garden also feels quite plain. Not the same level of love that was given to Ribbon Road in the previous DLC or even Cheeseland. And 200cc especially, it doesn't last very long, and there's not much going on beyond a few curvy turns and a not very good leaf shortcut. It just feels like Cloud Top Cruise was a better version of this. Shroom Ridge is actually probably one of the more fun ones in this DLC set. It just to me feels like a better version of Toad's Turnpike. There's all this traffic you gotta weave around, but the road is a lot more curvy, it's a lot more interesting. There's some cool shortcuts including this wind updraft near the finish line, and it just feels overall more polished. Lastly, let's talk about Toad Circuit. Everyone is universally questioning, why? It's the very first track of Mario Kart 7. Plain and simple. It's too plain and simple. And that's about the bulk of my impressions on the first round of DLC packs. I'd say I'm being fairly critical of it, but I'm doing so in a sense to set the expectations for the future DLC packs. Don't get me wrong, I am quite glad Mario Kart 8 is finally getting some extra life. It's so needed in a world where the Mario Kart mobile game of all things is getting the most attention by Nintendo. It's fair that some people are a bit thrown off by it, especially when Nintendo could have done more to give everything an extra level of polish. For example, the original DLC courses for Mario Kart 8 on Wii U were fantastic, and they blended perfectly with the original game on the title screen. Heck, they even became the original game once Deluxe came out on Switch. Stuff like anti-gravity would have made these quote-unquote new courses more dynamic, but the whole thing is that they're not really new. Nintendo knew by using the tour courses, they could very easily get away with quantity over quality, and I feel like that's not entirely a bad thing. While not everything might stick, there's bound to be many that do, and we got a good amount of them in this round. And if all this means the game gets a chance to be constantly updated, I'm okay with it. There's also a debate to be had on whether the value of this, the quality of this, and everything else surrounding it even matches what they're offering on its given timeline of coming out by the end of 2023. Would we have gotten the same number of courses in the same time frame for the same price if they made all original courses? Who knows, but this is what we're working with in the meanwhile, and it's only $25. For now, what do you think of the DLC? Did you pick it up, or are you going to wait for future packs to be released? Or will you skip it entirely? Let's chat in the comments below. That's about all I have to share. Oteku out. See you next time.